Spin, Eclectic Gun Reviews, and General Musical Meanderings. I got another 2023 preview post for you. This is all my Tier 1 listening, and I'm using all of these albums to sort of set the stage for all the music I'm listening to throughout 2023. And they'll be part of this whole elimination process that I'll go through. They'll end up with the top 20 of 2023 at the end of the year. One of these albums may actually be the album of the year, who knows? But we won't know until we get started. So I'm going to start off with The Adventures of Jet, Part 3, Coping with Insignificance. Now, The Adventures of Jet is a band formerly known as Bob Goblin, the band that I covered earlier last year, towards the end of last year. Great Dallas power pop group who had to go through this interesting identity change because of some complications with their record label that they had. In 1997, they were known as Bob Goblin, and they got a record deal that kind of went south. And rather than fight really with record companies on it, they just changed the name of the band. Now, in truth, musically, Adventures of Jet is almost indistinguishable from what Bob Goblin was doing. Same kind of twisty rhythms, same killer songwriting, same high level of musicianship. I think you might be able to argue that the music's maybe just a little bit less angular, maybe a little bit less aggressive, but it's by a small amount. In general, it sounds like a continuation musically of what Bob Goblin was doing up to 1997.
Once I ran the streets so big, man, passing in my cool machine, and then I began to hear them, and they made it all so clear. Blue divine, so tiny in the blue divine, I run away from you tonight, don't follow me, my blue divine.
When Hot Blitz Wire rebooted Bob Goblin under the name Adventures of Jet, it was considered a break from the Bob Goblin concept. And Bob Goblin's concept wasn't necessarily just musical, but it was also kind of a political statement. And I kind of find it fun to think about Adventures of Jet, just Bob Goblin basically going underground, like they got caught by the Orwellian powers that be that was overlooking Bob Goblin and had to change their name and just go underground. There's not a direct suggestion that really was the case here, but the fact that the album's called Part 3, and this actually is the third album under the project, kind of suggests that there is at least an acknowledgement of where Bob Goblin is coming from going into it. In any case, it's a very interesting identity study for the group, as well as a really great musical statement. Next up I got Infinity Knives and Brian Ennals, King Cobra. Infinity Knives is the producer on this album and kind of the main person who's involved with the musical side of the project. And it was his intention going into it, as I've read in interviews, where he said that he wanted to make a hip-hop John Carpenter album. And I really think that's kind of an interesting way to summarize where this album is coming from, because it does lean very heavily on modular synthesizers and has a very dark overtone to it. And his very synthesizer-based approach to this album really provides a lot of menace, as well as like decades bouncing references from one place to the other. But Brian Ennals' narratives keeps things very solidly in a post-George Floyd landscape.
Yeah, but we was chillin'. Started out in the park, couple kids with some weed, we was ready to spark. We was supposed to get stoned and this shit went dark. Cops came in with their cuffs trying to break us apart. I smell bait, and I do eat swine. And every pig died, promised we'd be fine. They was made to catch runaway slaves, stop users and put natives in caves. Wasn't even marching, I was going to work, minding my business, bitch, I'm going to work. See, I'm a janitor, put my hands up, they still blinding me in the eye with a tear gas.
Now, if you're looking to get into this album and you check out the first track on it, please don't be put off by it, because the opening track is this interesting like retro recording that's meant to sound like a degraded tape. Although using that song to set the stage kind of maybe gives a false impression of what the album may be about, it does show sort of the musical depth that this album is going for. It decidedly falls on the side of like alternative hip hop a la Death Grips, although not quite that aggressive. But it also has a very strong instrumental side that is easy to overlook, especially if you think about how hip-hop albums are very often constructed with, little interludes and stuff. The instrumental sections of this have a lot more depth than that. And I think that's a reflection of not just, Infinity Knives' kind of interest in avant-garde, but also like the input of Brian Ennals and the overall concept that binds the album together. Okay, next up I got Nordic Giants, Build Seas,
Dismantle,
Sons. This is actually a compilation of 2 EPs that Nordic Giants released in 2013. And their music definitely falls into this post-rock, progressive rock category. I think you could probably quite favorably compare them to like Mogwai and that sort of thing, but maybe with a little bit less edge. They still have that sort of cosmic overtone to what they're doing with a real cinematic scope of a lot of progressive rock. One of the things I think you lose with Nordic Giants to a degree on a recording is that they're a very visual group. Their live performances are sort of what they really hang their hat on. They dress in animalistic costumes. They have all of this sort of cinematic videos going on behind them, almost treating themselves like their own soundtrack. But I do think the transcendent nature of their live performances is reflected on their recordings. And finally, I got Jockstrap's I Love You, Jenny B. This album has been really, really difficult to pin down. And if you do a whole lot of reading about this, what critics say about it, I think a lot of them will agree. It has this sort of light, poppy nature, again, like the Cardigans would have, but also very experimental and very twisty. Almost sometimes getting into some territory like Gang Gang Dance would be, where things get really angular, but never to the point where it feels heavy.
Going round again. She believes in. I touch myself every time I see what's missing from my life.
For me, framing on this album, as I talked about last post, really just made things more and more difficult. But for me, the real hook was the song Glasgow that you just saw a little section of. It's a really amazing, amazing song. It's very catchy and very infectious and easy to sing along with. And I think that feature is the thing that really holds this album together, because even though these songs become a little bit challenging to sort of keep up with sometimes, they're all based around really great songwriting that keeps the listener engaged around all the twists and turns. And again, it stays very buoyant and never gets bogged down in its own experimentalism. So it travels this line very, very carefully, and because of that, has really worn well under repeated listens. That's all I got for you guys in this post. Again, I'd like to point out for a second that this Tier 1 stuff, some of this really has the biggest chance, in a way, of being Album of the Year. You may be seeing what will end up being my Album of the Year right now as we're checking this out. So these albums really are ones I think that not only set the tone for now, but are ones that will travel through with me throughout the course of this year. And that makes them pretty exciting. And a lot of this music has been so great, and the standards are being set so high, that it will make things difficult, but at the same time, give us the really best list at the end of the year if we follow the procedure as throughout the course of the year. That being said, if you're a person who is interested in how all this stuff works out, one of the Patreon levels I am putting together is that I'll put together a bracket just for fans of the channel. And I will send you videos and clips of these albums, and you can make your own decisions about them and send them back. And we'll put together a listener post. And so I'm going to put together a subscription for that over on the Patreon page. If you're interested in being involved in that, please let me know. But if you're just interested in posts, please like and subscribe and share out the videos with your friends. And follow me over on Spotify. 2023 playlist is growing as we speak. I'll be putting more of these videos out, 2 a week, I think, for the next few weeks. So try not to get oversaturated and keep up with them as best you can. Until you see you with the next one, I'll catch you on the flip side.